Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As the mayor mentioned, the purpose of this agenda item this evening is to give the council an update on the status of the city's Intermodal Transit Center project, and so we'll work through that. I'll cover a portion of it, and then the consultant team that's working on the project will also cover an element. Just to give a little bit of background on the project, the Intermodal Transit Center is envisioned as a transit facility featuring administrative and passenger service areas, exterior covered passenger boarding areas, bicycle parking facilities, and secure transit vehicle parking that will serve as a link between transportation service providers to facilitate the seamless integration of transportation services on the Palouse. Most predominantly those being offered by Moscow Valley Transit, that is the operator of the city's current fixed route service, Northwestern Trailways that operates the regional connections between the Boise and Coeur d'Alene Spokane corridor, Wheatland Express that provides the intercity connections, the intercity van pool services, and as well as the University of Idaho's Vandal shuttle transportation service. Just provide a little background of transit service in Moscow. Fixed route service was initiated in 2004. And since that time, we have seen an over 400% increase in ridership between 2004 and 2010, with average annual increases of about 20%. So early in 2004, ridership numbers on fixed route service was in about just a little over 34,000 riders. And ending the last current full fiscal year in 2010, we ended up with 143,000 rides provided over the course of that calendar year. It is estimated that over 80% of the riders are University of Idaho students, faculty, or staff, and there are several routes that are nearing capacity during some peak service periods. The city has made substantial investments in public transit infrastructure over the course of the last several years. In just the last three, the city of Moscow has installed 13 bus shelters, constructed over 2,000 lineal feet of sidewalk to access transit stops, and has constructed over 30 ADA pedestrian drops to enhance access to transit service within the community. There are yet some remaining needs. First is to better integrate some of the regional and local transit service providers, as well as secondarily to establish a base of operations for Moscow Valley Transit within Moscow. Currently, they are operating out of administrative offices down in Lewiston, and there is no fixed bus parking as parking out at the fairgrounds, and so they do lack the administrative office space and operational space within the community. The City of Moscow has pulled together just about $2 million in federal grant funding. A large portion of that is a $1.5 million Tiger II grant award that the city received, as well as additional 5309 public transit federal grants. And the city has also set aside over the course of the last 3 to 4 years $186,000 in city match funding that is required for those 5309 grant awards. As well, we do have a couple additional pending grant requests. We have an FY11 5309 grant request in the amount of $500,000 that we're hopeful that the city would be able to secure. The project itself has been organized into two distinct phases. Phase 1, which is the phase of the project we're currently within, included the facility programming, site selection, concept design, construction cost estimate, and we have just recently added on the environmental review when the council approved the amendment to the contract to allow that service to occur in respect to the Tiger I grant award to allow us to proceed on that project. Phase 2 then was going to carry us through on final design and construction. The consultant team that was secured for the project includes Design West, WH Pacific, and Kittleson Associates. And so they have been the consultant team working on the project. Progress on Phase 1 to date. So far, we have completed the Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC organization, and we have conducted 3 meetings of the Technical Advisory Committee. We've completed the facility program assessment. We have completed the level 1, 2, and 3 site assessments. We've conducted 2 public open houses on the project, and we have the TAC has identified a recommended preferred site. The consultant team has completed their traffic impact assessment and the initial facility concept design. And you'll see some of the building floor plans as well as some alternate architectural styling and building elevations this evening. Within Phase 1, our remaining tasks are to complete TAC meeting number 4 and 5. 4 actually will occur tomorrow afternoon in this room at 1:30. And 5 is anticipated to be completed in early May. And then we have our last and final open house that we would also complete in May. We would finalize that concept design and get our more detailed and finalized construction cost and operational cost estimate for the facility. And we would complete their environmental review that's currently underway. One of our first tasks on the project was the formation of our technical advisory committee. It's intended to include representatives of all the service providers that will be utilizing the facility, as well as other community and university representatives. We have J.R. Van Tassel, who is the Executive Director of Regional Public Transportation that operates Moscow Valley Transit. We have Peg Motley from Wheatland Express, Charlie Neal from Northwestern Trailways, Brett Dillon from the University of Idaho's Architectural Engineering Services, Carl Root, who is the Director of the University of Idaho's Parking and Transportation Services Division, Jennifer Barrett as the Latah County Commissioner, Samantha Cipher as a representative of ASUI, or the Associated Students of the University of Idaho. Mike McGann serves as a representative of the city's Transportation Commission, and Gary Riedner serves as the Public Transportation Lead for the City of Moscow. With that, I will turn the microphone over to Tom that will walk us through the facility programming and into the concept designs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and fellow councilmen. Welcome. My name is Tom Jones with the firm of W&H Pacific, project manager and principal with the firm. I'd like to just walk you through briefly, as Bill alluded, as we started to kick off the project with the Technical Advisory Committee, the first thing we really needed to understand is the program elements. This slide represents some of the site program elements that each of the stakeholders, if you will, the transit providers, required on the overall project. We have an understanding then of the services they provide, the vehicles, the vehicle type, the sizes of the vehicles, staffing, hours of operation, essentially the parking needs, if you will, if there's delivery, drop-off areas, and alike. Looked at then likewise within the building program itself, understanding that each of the service providers had their own unique requirements, but as well there were some areas within the building too that they would have some sharing, some overlap where we could again double up in the same use. So as we ended up with a program building around just over 9,000 square feet, and then additional covered area for a platform, if you will, for another additional 5,000 square feet. Then as we start armed with understanding what the program elements are of the overall project, we looked within the community itself to look at where potential siting could occur. Understanding, looking at the community map where these service routes do currently exist with the Moscow Valley Transit, the east and west, where they do kind of come together in the central business district and by the campus. We understand from the Wheatland Express as it comes in from Pullman, Trailways as it enters into the site, the community from the north or to the south or to the west, going either to Coeur d'Alene or to Lewiston, and Pullman ultimate to, let's say, Boise or Portland and Seattle. We start looking at where those opportunities in the central portion of the site, if you will, or the community, where the focus really starts looking into it. So we identified a list of criteria, both sizing, availability, needing obviously to have close proximity to major transportation routes, as well as areas in which the ridership would have a desire. So we identified 5 potential sites where the facility could be located. In doing so, we've then established criteria to evaluate each of those particular sites, and did evaluate each one, and went through a rating scoring process with the stakeholders and identified the sites in this location as being the 2 preferred finalists, if you will. We didn't want to have one site or put all our eggs in one basket, if you will, and we looked at 2 potential sites to evaluate. Those sites we've identified as Site 3. Overall on the project. This one is actually on the University of Idaho campus. Here is Sweet Avenue, Railroad, College as it goes on out to Jackson. The site itself is fairly compact. Transit vehicles would be located right along Railroad at this place. A location, platform into the overall building itself, outdoor visitor plaza areas, covered bicycle parking areas. And at night, there would be The Moscow Valley Transit vehicles will be stored in this location at night and then again out during the day, and rather minimal impact to the existing parking lot. So that was essentially Site 3. And then the other site we identified as Site 5. And that was essentially right across, if you will, Paradise Creek that runs along through here, and there's the trail. Site 5 similarly has now up to, as College continues on, and you can see orientation to Jackson. The transit stops at this location, covered platform, structure itself, covered parking, on-site parking for ADA. There's a requirement, for example, of 5 University of Idaho parking and transportation services vehicles that would be there overnight as well, and overnight location. So with that, we evaluated, set again another fine-tuning criteria to establish and evaluate each one of the particular sites. This criteria looked at proximity, being able to satisfy the program elements, dealing with expansion, being able to look at providing a high level of service, overall impacts to the existing, what's essentially there on the ground itself, what is the cost to prepare and develop the site, going through, again, public input, and as well as in the ranking specifically by the service providers, came up with a preference and the preferred site of site number 3. You notice this site has somewhat of some refinement to it, where the previous plan was right about in this location, if you will. Working with some of the University of Idaho staff, there was a desire to bring it closer to Sweet Avenue, more visible, if you will, in its presence at that intersection. Still very much the same components in regards to the transit vehicles. There'll be a platform wrapping around. This is now the covered bicycle parking in this location. Likewise, again, same vehicle parking with the existing parking lot of now 10 Moscow Valley minibuses, if you will, transit vehicles overnight. And kind of sets us up to looking at then now the refinement, if you will, of the conceptual floor plan. And I'll turn it over now here to Ned Warnick, and can talk a little bit more about some of the architectural components and where we are conceptually. Corner if you need it.
This may look a little more developed than it actually is. This is a conceptual floor plan in which we're trying to investigate the size of the building and understand the scope of the project. This is still under review. I guess it received its first public viewing today in the public open house, and here again tonight. We'll work very closely with the TAC committee tomorrow to look at this in a very detailed room-by-room method. But to try to give you a quick orientation, the Sweet Avenue, Railroad Street, the covered canopy for loading and unloading, a public lobby and restroom space. And those are probably the most important parts of the building just to make this work for the intermodal function which it's designed for. Supporting that is the U of I Parking and Transportation Services having their office space and their operations space along the back side of the building. And on the front side of the building would be the Regional Public Transit, and in addition any tenants or vendors that might be transit related, possibly Northwest Trailways, or Wheatland Express agents, or potentially a small coffee counter or something like that. But a small bit of flexibility in the services that are available in this lobby. In tongue-in-cheek, I was thinking of this in the previous item of how I would explain how big this was. It's 8,000 square feet, but in speaking in megaloads, it's 3 megaloads wide, but it's only half a megaload long. So that kind of gives you an idea of the size of the project. And then something trying to get solicit input from the community and from yourself as the council is to try to look at what sort of clothes we might put on this building to make it appropriate for the community. Nils Peterson paid us a nice compliment, Design West, saying that we left our buildings around town because we knew what to put in Moscow. And so some of you may believe that for the first image here. This is what we affectionately call the traditional look, playing up on the U of I design cues and trying to realize that this is a building that relates to the campus that may indeed be located on. And then This was the one that Nils wasn't quite so sure about. This one is affectionately known as the Art Deco, or the kind of slick contemporary look. I tell you, in my imagination, this looked a lot better than it came off in these images. It's really not supposed to look like George Jetson's about to get off the bus here. And then option 3 and 4 are a little bit more looking at something that may be a blending of contemporary and then maybe a Moscow aesthetic. And so these renderings, because they're so preliminary, it's a bit hard to tell you this story. But if you could imagine that this was something that had brick and metal in a way that would look like it belonged here and belonged in the city of Moscow. This one we call the swoop, and the option 4 tends to play up something that would be a little bit more wood and brick oriented. I guess would call this one the wedge if it had a nickname. But those are the 4 that we showed in the public open house. There was a definite leaning against option 2. I can report those findings. And of the other 3, there was a pretty even split across the board as to likes and dislikes in the other 3. But I don't believe that option 2 garnered any positive votes, and I think it garnered some definite negative votes. So I'll take that as advisement. Maybe we shouldn't take that any further. And I welcome council input either before or after the remainder of this presentation.
In addition to the design work, we also are planning early on with the facility to try to meet LEED Gold standard, and so that's been considered throughout the process. And right now, it looks like we are very close to making LEED Gold certification on the project. So I also wanted to mention that. So as I mentioned, these are the steps that we have completed so far in phase 1, and so what is left yet to be completed again was that TAC meeting 4 and 5. They completed tomorrow for meeting 4 and meeting 5 sometime in May. That next open house that again would be sometime in early May, and then the finalization of the construction cost estimate as well as the environmental review. Probably beyond phase 1, there are also some additional, I guess, broader steps on the overall progress of the project. On February 28th, we did go up and present the project to the University of Idaho's president and executive leadership, and subsequently received their support for us to continue to progress the project on the university site, and their support behind the project for presentation to the Board of Regents for ultimate approval for construction of the facility on the university's property. We are targeting taking the packaging of the project and taking it to the State Board of Regents in June of this year. That would allow us a good timeline once we received approval from the Board of Regents to move into the final design that would begin in July. We would be in final design stage really from July to about December, where we'd have to have the design completed, and then be in a position to be able to bid the project in January, which would be an ideal bidding time to get the best bids on the project. So certainly we would be seeking Board of Regents approval in June. Once we've completed that and we have identified that we have adequate funding for the project to proceed into final design, we'd make that decision in July. We'd move into phase 2 starting in August, and again, as I mentioned, we have final design between the fall and early winter, be in a position to bid in early spring, and then construction would commence during the construction season and summer and early fall of 2012, with the target completion by the winter end of 2012 or very early spring of 2013.